Jag hoppas att alla håller ställningarna nu. Det har varit en otroligt rolig dag tycker jag. Spännande, så jag har inte hunnit känna efter huruvida jag är trött eller inte än. Så nu koncentrerar vi oss här på de sista talarna. Och först ut är Ulla Kaiser, som är seniorforskare och bevarandespecialist på Kungliga biblioteket i Köpenhamn, Danmark. Och, ja, absolut. Och som arbetar både med fysisk och digital samlingar. Välkommen. Vad ska du göra? Du har så fantastiskt hår. Det är verkligen.
Så, går det bra?
Hörs vi?
Ja, nej, jo, det går vist meget godt. Nej, det går ikke. Okay. Er der hul igennem nu? Okay. Jamen, jeg hedder Ulla Bøvad Kaiser, og eftersom mit svenske det ikke er så bra, så har jeg lovet at holde foredraget på engelsk. So I'm going to talk to you about how we can describe and model the costs and the benefits of curating digital cultural heritage. As we've already seen many great examples of here today at the conference from the British Library Labs and from the Rijksmuseum, we really want to be able to enable people to benefit from all the rich resources of cultural heritage that memory institutions safeguard. And therefore we need to care about the costs of curating this heritage and care about how we spend the limited costs, the limited resources that we have available in the best possible way. The smarter we invest in digital curation, the more benefits we can actually provide to our stakeholders. And so just to manage your expectations a little bit, I'm not going to present a calculator that will automatically calculate all your costs and benefits for your digital curation activities. Rather, I'm going to show you some models that you can use to better understand the economics of digital curation and maybe kickstart some thinking around how you can account for the costs and how you can actually identify benefits in your institution. Let's get on with it. So, to those of you in the audience, I cannot see you very well, but do you know how much you currently pay for curating your digital assets? And do you think that it is a fair amount? Are you spending more or less than organizations that you normally compare yourself with? And are the costs justified by the benefits of curation? And what are, in fact, the benefits of curation in your organization? So these questions are not easy for managers to answer. And this is partly because curation costs are often not very well defined, and they are intertwined with other cost centers in your organization, and partly also because it's still difficult to identify benefits and measure the value of the benefits. But let's start with an overview of the digital curation environment, just to get an understanding of the stakeholders and all the processes involved in curation. So as you know, digital curation is dependent on technology. The physical bit streams constituting the information must remain intact and accessible through the current systems, and the intellectual content of the information must remain usable over time. And now counteracting the constant threat from technological obsolescence requires a series of actively managed activities, including emulation of systems and migration of formats. Facilities with adequate hardware and software must be in place, as well as the infrastructure and the power to keep the systems running. In addition, people with the necessary skills to maintain the systems and act as curators of the digital assets must be available. The required activities for the long-term preservation of digital information and the flow of information are described at a high level in the OIS standard for an open archival information system, the OIS reference model, which you can see a representation of here on this slide. So we have the producers of the information, over here, and we have the users or the consumers here, and we have the management of all the curation activities which are running in here in this archive. We have ingest, we have data management, we have archival storage, access, preservation planning, and administration. And all of this is the digital curation environment that we are trying to cost and model. Somebody forgot these. Okay, maybe I'll get use. Maybe I'll need them later on. So keeping all these systems alive and ensuring that the cultural heritage remains accessible and available to users and open to users requires an uninterrupted flow of resources. To make this curation system, or curation service as I like to call it, we need to be able to balance the cost of curation against the benefits that the curated assets brings to stakeholders, and these are both the users and society as a whole. Now, in our communities, most of the cultural heritage is considered a public good, which is funded through taxation. And it may also be possible to generate revenues from user fees or from licenses, for example, by charging for high-quality digital images of documentary heritage. But often there are no direct revenues from investments in curation of cultural heritage. However, there may be cost savings obtained by curating the assets in more effective or efficient ways and by optimizing the quality of the assets. For example, by getting rid of redundant, obsolete, and trivial information, by selecting alternative file formats that take up less storage capacity, or by restructuring data and metadata to make it easier and faster for people to search it. And on the bottom line, such cost savings are just as good as revenues. Okay. Let's have a look at all the stakeholders, those who care directly about the costs and benefits of digital curation. Now, it's important to understand that the different nature of their interest and to perform a sound analysis of the cost and benefits. So first we have the role of the curation service consumer, this guy up here. This is often the director or financial director of an organization, and these guys need to ensure that curation is undertaken in a sustainable way. That is, balancing the cost of the curation service with the benefits that it brings to the organization. Second, we have the curation service provider. This is the role of those who deliver the curation service and who need to calculate the actual cost of the service and understand in detail how the costs vary with the quality of the service. In some organizations, these providers are in-house, and they may also be delivered out as an external service. And then we have the role of the producer of the cultural heritage assets. This can, for example, be researchers that, along with their grant applications, need to write a data management plan, including estimates of what it will take to curate their research data over a given period of time. And likewise, the users of cultural heritage have an interest because the quality of the curation service will impact the value of the assets provided by the organization. And then last but not least, we have the resource providers. This is the role of those who fund or support curation. And these guys have an interest, of course, because they need to ensure that, that their investments are sound. So from 2013 to 2015, I was involved in a European project called the Collaboration to clarify the cost of curation. Among friends, just the 4C project. And this project has brought together and leveraged existing knowledge, models, tools related to the economics of curation to advance understanding of this field and to help stakeholders make smarter investments in digital curation. Now, the 4C project has developed a set of tools for communication, discussion, and analysis of costs, benefits, risks, and sustainability of curation, which I will point you to at the end of my presentation. But what I would really like to focus on here is a generic model, or rather a framework of model developed by the 4C project, which allows you to analyze costs and benefits from two perspectives, namely that of the consumer and that of the provider of the curation services. Here you see a representation of the service provider offering a curation service to the service consumer. The curation service includes all the activities or processes that organizations need to have in place to curate their holdings of cultural heritage. The service consumer is responsible for the overall curation of the assets, and the service provider is responsible for providing the curation service. And the reason that it's important to be aware of these two roles and their responsibilities is that it helps clarify their incentives for curation, and these are not the same. So when we talk about costs and benefits, it's very important that we address whose costs and whose benefits are we actually talking about. And this distinction also helps to analyze what kinds of financial information these two stakeholder roles require and what types of models are needed to provide this information. This is a more schematic diagram showing the model framework and the roles of the consumer and the provider, again centered on the curation service. In order to make strategic decisions, the consumer needs a business model for curating digital heritage assets. The model must describe business functions as well as the expenses it incurs and the revenues that it generates. This includes high-level information about the costs and the corresponding quality of the curation service, as well as the cost drivers, so that the consumer can actually specify the requirements for a service level agreement with the service provider. It also includes knowledge of what the benefits of the curated cultural heritage assets represents to different stakeholders and an understanding of the value of these benefits in relation to the organization's missions and risk management plans. This part of the model we call the consumer cost-benefit model, and I will get back to this upper part of the model shortly. If we then look at the other perspective, the provider also needs a business model, but not the same cost and benefit information as the consumer. The provider needs detailed information about what drives the cost and the quality of the service, so that he knows exactly what it takes to deliver the service according to the service level agreement. And the provider also needs to understand how the service generates benefits to stakeholders, and if it is an external for-profit company, also how to generate the required revenues. This part of the framework is called the provider cost and benefit model, and I would like to look a little bit more about. I would like to go into a little bit more details about the cost model of this lower part of the model. So I will talk about a little bit more about this part of the model, but I will start with talking a little bit about this part of the model concerning the costs. So let's look at how such a model looks like. Again, we have the curation service and the service provider represented by this guy. And in the model, the curation service is defined by the service level agreement. And depending on the relation between the consumer and the provider, this agreement may be more or less formal. Typically less formal when the service is delivered in-house than when it is outsourced. The curation service consists of a bundle of curation activities. And the model should specify all the involved activities and the required resources, that is, the money and the manpower, needed to complete these activities. So in the 4C project, we have suggested to use the OIS functional model that I showed on one of the first slides as a framework for specifying curation activities. So in order for us to calculate the cost and analyze benefits, we need, in order to calculate the cost, we need to define all the activities that are involved in our digital curation service, and then we need to find out what are the capital costs and what are the labor costs required to fulfill these activities. Yes. Apart from specifying the activities, the model also needs to define the quality of the activities. A storage solution is not just a storage solution, it has certain qualities which impact the cost. It is also important that the model defines accounting principles. For example, in addition to the direct capital and labor costs, we may need to account for some indirect costs, that is, the shared costs that are not that we cannot immediately distribute on a specific activity. And we need to account for the frequency of the costs, that is, to define how the model should account for costs that occur in different points in time. Some costs occur as one-off costs, others are ongoing, and others are recurring. And so far, I've only outlined the requirements for accounting for past cost. If we want cost models to estimate future cost also that we can use for budgeting, we need to define the criteria for such predictions and develop formulas. So summing up, the cost model defines an activity breakdown structure and a resource breakdown structure. And if we use a common model for analyzing costs of curation, it will be easier to compare the costs across organizations, and thereby also easier to identify best practices in curation and select the smartest solutions. I would just like to show you an example from the Royal Library. So these are the costs of digital curation, and these are the names that we use for all these costs. And of course, different institutions use different terms about their cost activities. So what we have been trying to do in the 4C project is to map it against some common terminology that we take from the OIS reference model. And so the idea is not that you have to look into all these specific, I know that it's probably not readable from the back, but it's just to give you an idea about how you can actually make your cost data more comparable by mapping them to common entities, functional entities. Okay. So far, we've only talked about modeling the costs and the quality of curation services. And now I would like us to have a look at how the benefits can be analyzed. Here you can see the service provider talking to a customer about the cost and the quality of a range of services. But the consumer needs to consider these costs and quality of the service and analyze this information against the service requirements of her organization, and then transform this information into costs and benefits. And so it's very important to note that while we can describe costs and quality of the service in an objective way, when it comes to the benefits, they are subjective. They depend on the specific perspective and needs of the consumer. So the value of a benefit, take for example an organization's level of trustworthiness, this value depends on how important this is to the stakeholder. If it's very important, it will represent a higher value than if it's less important. This seems very obvious, but it's important to keep in mind when you talk about benefits, because the benefits to you may not mean the same to benefits to people in other organizations. So I would now go on to talk about the upper half of the model framework, the consumer cost benefit model. And so again, we are looking at the curation service, but this time from the perspective of the consumer. So an organization's curation objectives and the applied strategies to meet these objectives are central for the evaluation of costs and benefits of the service. The objectives and strategies define the requirements for the curation service. And as we saw, the curation service has certain cost and quality. Again, the consumer needs to transform the cost and the quality into cost and benefit. And so the result of the evaluation of cost and benefits impact the curation objectives and strategies and may result in changes. If, for example, the service is considered too expensive in relation to the benefits it brings, and these changes will, of course, affect the service requirements and so on. The curation objectives and strategies are defined by the context in which the organization operates. So this is depend on which type of organization are you dealing with, what are the information assets, what's the digital cultural heritage that you're dealing with, and who are your stakeholders. And so this whole organizational context influences the curation objectives and strategies. Likewise, risks may have an effect on the curation objectives and strategies, and strategies must be applied to meet and control these risks by mitigating threats and maximizing opportunities. So defining the curation objectives and strategies for your organization and analyzing how they are influenced by your current curation service, your organizational context, and potential risks is a good starting point for understanding costs and benefits. So this model is really can really be used if you want to analyze your stakeholders, your conditions, your organizational context, and to think about how these processes and stakeholders are interrelated. So, as I promised, I would like to show you some of the tools that we have made available. This is the Curation Cost Exchange platform that the 4C project has developed. As the name indicates, it is intended for sharing data and knowledge related to the economies of curation. And you can actually also, in this exchange, submit your own cost data sets in a structured way, and then compare your cost data with other organizations. So, and you can also find other tools that are useful. I just need to click on the screen. I don't know how to do that. Oh, there it is. Sorry. I found the, the pointer. So here you can see the live curation cost exchange, and we have different types of tools. Well, you can't really see all of it. Well, that's almost. So we have some definition of basic cost concepts that you can go in and look at, and we have analyzed 10 different existing cost models, and we have evaluated them against each other. So if you're interested in cost models, you can find a lot of information here. You can also find information about what drives the costs and how you can plan for sustainability. But what I would like to show you is this tool for comparing or submitting cost data. So I'm sorry about the screen. So you have to just sign in here. And so here you can actually, this is the set that I have already prepared. So this is what you can edit your organization. You can add your organization here. The name, the description of the organization, what type of organization is it, what's the language, what's a country, and what is the currency that you want to account for cost in. And then you can also indicate if you want to share your costs with other organizations or you want to just keep them as private information. And then you can go in and either edit an existing cost data, or you can actually define a new cost data set. These are the data from the Royal Library. Just see here. So you can define different collections, and you can define what year they are, how many staff are working on this collection. You can add the data volume, and you can indicate what types of assets you have. So if you maybe have some video, you can, I have already used mine. So you can add the different types of assets that you have in your collection. And you can then add new cost units where you can define. Maybe this is, you will have to probably look at it for yourself, but you can add cost units and you can map them to activities. And this mapping was what I showed you on the table from the Royal Library, where you can map towards the OIS entities. And this should allow you to compare the cost data. And this is what you can do over here. I don't think there is a cost data set ready. Yes, and then you can either collect your internal cost data or you can compare with other institutions. Okay, I think I will stop there. And I hope that you may take the opportunity to visit this site. And I'd just also like to acknowledge my colleagues from the 4C project, and you can find more information about the project on our website. And I would just also like to point to the small clip arts that I've been using in my presentation. These are freely available from a Danish site on digital preservation. And I think that there might be a couple of minutes for questions if you have any. Thank you for your attention.
Tack. Har vi någon fråga till Ulla? Inga frågor.
Nej, det är lite
alla
abstrakt.
Alla är så imponerade. Rolf. Hur många institutioner har testat sina kostnader, frågar Rolf?
Det er faktisk ikke ret mange endnu, desværre. Vi har under 50, der har testet. Men det er klart, at jo flere institutioner, som submitter deres data, jo bedre mulighed får vi for også at sammenligne data og blive klogere og lære af hinandens erfaringer. Men det er et stort problem. Mange folk er lidt bekymrede ved at lægge deres oplysninger ud. Ja. Ja, det vil være rigtig dejligt. Ja.
Avslutande kommentaren där var att fler institutioner i Sverige borde uppmuntras att testa det här så att vi kan...
Ja, der er mulighed for at provide feedback stadigvæk. Så, ja. Selvom også projektet er slut.
Ja.
Samuel Branting från Stockholmskällan. Du talar om kostnaderna mycket, men fördelarna, alltså the benefits som du talar om. Har du några tips på hur man skulle vilja definiera dem för sin organisation om man står i begrepp att vilja göra något så här, börja genomföra den här processen?
Ja, alltså,
frågan var, har du några tips att ge hur man skulle kunna definiera fördelarna för sin organisation om man skulle vilja börja pröva det här?
Ja. Altså, jeg kan anbefale at læse nogle af de rapporter, som Neil Bigre fra Bigre & Charles har lavet, som også ligger på nettet. Han har været inde og undersøge for eksempel universiteter og forskellige datacentre, hvordan de har undersøgt, hvilke nogle fordele og benefits der er ved digitalt bevarendet. Men jeg har ikke nogen konkrete tips til det. Men altså den model, jeg viste, hvor man ligesom tænker igennem, hvad det er for nogle interessenter, man har med at gøre, det er et godt udgangspunkt for det. Ja. Ja, det vil jeg meget gerne. Ja, selvfølgelig.
Det blir en tweet på den länken. Det tackar vi för. Ja. Tack så mycket, Ulla. Tack så mycket.
Ja, tack.